trail towards the last day of our precious time here in this esteemed body. Please stop wasting my time. On behalf of the 60,000 strong I represent, please stop wasting their time. Stop playing in their faces. Stop manufacturing crises. Stop making up stuff.
The Democratic Party and the Georgia House of Representatives have walked out of the House chamber instead of standing in here fighting for fiscal responsibility of your tax dollars.
In a dramatic move, Georgia House Democrats walk out during the vote over banning Georgia prisons from providing gender-affirming care for transgender inmates. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers. It's day 39, the last day before Sine Die. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. We'll have more on the day coming up. Georgia's business community is trying to adapt to some major changes these days. They're tackling everything from how artificial intelligence is changing the business landscape to figuring out the potential effects of federal tariffs. And this session, they turn to the governor and the legislature for help in limiting damage awards in civil lawsuits. I had a chance to sit down with the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber to discuss challenges, the big win with tort reform, and a look at what's next. Also tonight, we'll talk about what's been memorable this session and what bills are still hanging around before it all wraps up late on Friday. Two people who closely follow the action join the show. But first, Capitol correspondent Sarah Callis breaks down the 39th day under the Gold Dome.
Hi, Donna. The House and Senate jumped into hyperdrive on day 39.
In the Senate, almost 90 bills and resolutions were posted on their rules calendar as legislators hustle to pass as much legislation as they can in the last 2 days of the session. HB 397 is a controversial bill dealing with a variety of voting measures.
We helped them streamline this thing, and this has the blessings of Gabrielle, who actually performs the elections all over the state. It fixes the issues with our third-party candidates, and it stops counties from doing this pop-up voting sites.
Not true, say Democrats who oppose the bill.
Election security is important, but this isn't about security, it's about control. It's about disenfranchisement, and it's about keeping power in the hands of the few at the expense of the many. Georgians want elections that are free, fair, and accessible, not the partisan attempt to put more roadblocks between the people and the ballot box.
They say it erodes voting rights by removing Georgia from ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, gives unconstitutional power to the state election board, and would no longer allow absentee ballots to be hand-delivered the weekend before elections.
The ability for a voter to drop off an absentee ballot the weekend before election is a critical one. It's a crucial access point that this bill would take away. And in an era where we have seen that the post office is wholly unreliable, many voters have relied on dropping it off the weekend before an election because life happens.
The bill passed along party lines, 33 to 23. Two House bills recognizing homegrown Georgian foods, cornbread and Brunswick stew, were both Frankensteined into new bills. HB 14 would have made cornbread the official state bread, but was changed into the Georgia Music Office and Music Ready Communities Act. And HB 233 would have made Brunswick stew the official state stew, but was co-opted into not only the stew, but also making the fourth Friday each November National Sugarcane Syrup Day in Georgia, became the new home for the missing cornbread bill, and prohibits state agencies from contracting with any country considered a foreign country of concern. Both were passed, but no word on if the changes left a bad taste in anyone's mouth. And in the House, recognition of one of our own, as long-term cameraman Wesley Nichols was recognized for his 25 years of contribution covering the legislature for Lawmakers.
We are thrilled to honor Wes on his quarter-century career milestone capturing Georgia politics.
And another special guest in the chamber, Georgia First Lady Marty Kemp. She was joined by Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities Commissioner Kevin Tanner to talk about 988, the mental health crisis hotline.
In 2023, only 16% of Georgians had heard of 988. A poll that we did recently, 84% of Georgians have now heard of 988. And a lot of that is because of the work that the First Lady's done helping us spread the word.
Then, the House moved on to the first of several rules calendars. Members approved Senate Bill 17, or Ricky and Alyssa's Law, named after 2 school shooting victims. The legislation originally in the bill to create a panic button system in classrooms was added to the school safety bill passed Monday. So this version of SB 17 added clarifying language.
We passed this in the school safety bill. This is just an amendment and cleanup.
Members had personal testimony about this issue.
I waited a day or two before I asked my child if he had heard the news and asked him how it felt. I asked him if it made it feel scary or if it made him feel anxious. And he said, "No, Mom. That school only had 1 resource officer. Our school has 2. When an active shooter comes, we're going to be better prepared." That was the day I realized that my child uses the word when, not if, when he thinks about an active shooter coming to his school.
The bill passed unanimously, and a demonstration from the Democrats in protest of SB 185. The bill would ban the use of state funds for gender-affirming care for transgendered prisoners in Georgia. Democrats spoke in opposition.
What is it? What is going on with my colleagues that they have become so obsessed with what is happening in transgender citizens' panties and their underwear and their boxer shorts and their bedrooms and their medical rooms when they talk to their doctors, when they deal with their families? Why is it that this has become such an obsession?
And then walked out of the chamber. Republicans were quick to criticize the move.
Probably the most disheartening moment I've ever had in my service here as a member of the House.
The bill passed 100 to 2. In an unusual move, the Senate also passed SB 214, which requires voters to use paper ballots in elections. The bill will have to wait until the next legislative session to be considered, since it didn't pass before crossover day. That's my Capitol Report. Donna?
Thanks, Sarah. Every year, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce supports hundreds of bills that help businesses across the state, regardless of their size. I recently chatted with the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce to get his insights on how this legislative session is shaping up for the business community. We talked about some important topics like the need for a skilled workforce, the challenges businesses are facing related to AI, and how some companies are preparing for the impact of tariffs. But first, we took a dive into a big win for the chamber, civil lawsuit reform.
We're very excited and appreciative of the governor, the speaker, the lieutenant governor, of passing really the first piece of tort reform or lawsuit abuse reform. And it put in perspective with me the other day when I realized it was 20 years ago this year that the Georgia Chamber worked with Governor Perdue to pass the first round of tort reform in Georgia. And it's been 20 years of work every day with our members and with the General Assembly. And so, our hope here is that we see a reduction in some of the frivolous lawsuits, that we see some insurers return to Georgia that have left, that we see some stabilization of rates, and that maybe most importantly, we can actually see some of our rural hospitals improve their ability to attract doctors, particularly OBGYNs, into some of the parts of the state that really just haven't been able to keep those physicians in place. And so, big bill, 69 is still out there. Some other bills that are still in that space, but the governor's Senate Bill 68 was a huge win, a huge step.
Let's talk about 20 years.
Yeah.
What happened in that space, that tort reform space, over 20 years?
So what happened primarily was in those first 5 or 6 years after that, the court system overturned a lot of those findings that the General Assembly passed. And the General Assembly, for whatever reason, we didn't come back and fix them when the courts pointed out that there were flaws out there. And so between that and then a lot of new calls of actions being passed at the same time, the business community suffered through that. We made our points, but it wasn't until about 3 years ago that we decided that we really needed to engage differently. The governor was very engaged. He wanted to, he's traveled the state this year listening to businesses and doctors and everyone to really hear what those issues were. And then he came out with his 2 bills in January.
And you had some heavy hitters. You had Waffle House. You had Uber. You had those big executives involved.
You had those executives, but I think what was more important is if you look at that first press conference the governor held and you look behind him, I didn't see all the CEOs up there. What I saw were hardworking Georgians in their Home Depot aprons, in their Waffle House aprons, in their hard hats, in their lab coats. They said, this matters to me and my family, and I want to be here. And we heard, every community that I toured in the last 3 months, we heard from small business owners with their stories. We heard from doctors saying they were shutting down their practices because their physicians were moving to North Carolina. We heard those horror stories everywhere we went. So this wasn't just about the grass tops. This was the grassroots, everyday, hardworking Georgians saying we need to see a change.
Do you worry about lawsuits like you had 20 years ago?
Of course. And I think what we'll do this time is we'll go in and we'll battle those out, and we'll try to preserve what Governor Kemp said was important, what our members say is important, and we'll be much more vigilant than our predecessors were 20 years ago.
Let's talk a little about insurance reform. So that is something that people are saying that's next year. What are your feelings about that?
So I think we have to, first of all, we need to make sure that these changes that go into 68 and 69 have chance to work. What we saw in Texas, what we saw in Florida is that those rates did come down. In Texas, they saw med-mal rates go down 54%. Took 2 years, but they saw them go in. So listen, last year, I consider what the governor passed last year was insurance reform when insurers had to provide all that data to John King. We trust Commissioner King with what recommendations he might come back with as he looks at that data. And so we'll be part of those discussions, but I think we've got to I think we'll see more insurers come back to the market because of what we've passed this year. And the more competition in that market, the lower the rates are going to be. If you only got 2 or 3 companies that are writing, trucking, underwriting for trucking companies, they're going to set their own price. If you've got 20 coming in, it's a much more competitive market. And so that's what our hope is, that we'll see some immediately stabilization, and then we'll work with the commissioner and others next year.
So you'll see some companies who want to come into Georgia, stay in Georgia, because they think insurance will stabilize at least, if nothing else.
Right. And hopefully we don't see the frivolous lawsuits. We don't see the nuclear verdicts at the same level. We've closed some of those loopholes. And our hope is the insurers we've talked to, so we want to be in Georgia. We want to underwrite in Georgia. It's just not feasible for us right now.
Okay. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about your strategic plan, Georgia 2050. What is that?
So in January, after almost 2 years of traveling the state, listening to our members, listening to legislators, elected leaders at the local level, we unveiled Georgia 2050. And it's a bold 25-year outlook for the state's economy. So it's more than just our strategic plan. It's really a strategy for the state's economy. And what we heard from business leaders is that we weren't just thinking 4 or 5 years out, that they were making investments for 20, 25 years. And you think about it this way. We were at Hyundai's Meta plant grand opening and announcement last week with the governor. They were very clear. This is not a short-term investment. We're going to be here for the next 100 years. To fix the interstate going into Savannah is a 20-year project. To build 2 new nuclear reactors is a 20-year project. To deepen the port of Savannah is almost a 20-year project. And so we felt it was important to look long-term. So this plan looks at the data, how Georgia's growing, where it's growing, what the business is going to look like, what the disruptions are going to be. And Donna, it focuses on 5 kind of core pillars, as we call them. Making sure we've got the right workforce and talent in place. Making sure those young men and women can AI-proof their careers. That's what our big concern is. Number 2, to make sure that we've got the energy production in place and the infrastructure investments that we need. To make sure that we're focused on growing the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs in the state. That we remain a competitive and vibrant location for economic development. And at the end of the day, that we have regional prosperity and healthy communities so that every community in Georgia has the chance to grow, and we've got the right health care support and systems in place to help them do that. And so every policy, every event, every program, every bill at the Capitol that we work on falls under one of those 5 pillars.
First of all, let's talk about where are we now if we don't make some changes?
I think there are 2 things we need to look at. Number 1 is we have to get men and women that are disconnected from the workforce today back in. If everybody that wanted to work could find a job and had the skills, we'd be at full employment. That's why we have bills like Senate Bill 207 on occupational licensure reform coming from Senator Strickland to make it easier for men and women that have been incarcerated to get the license they need to go into the workforce. And so that's part of what we got to work on. The other part is looking at Generation Alpha, which are our elementary, our middle school kids right now, to make sure that they've got the skill sets they need to be hireable 20 years from now when they get out of college, and that they've got the right skills in place as AI disrupts their first choice career and their second choice career. So there's a lot of work that's got to go on in that space. We have a couple bills that the governor supported this year, Best Place for Talent being one of those. And so we've got to have those types of policies, but I also think we've got to be much bolder. The fact that my son's a freshman at UGA right now, go Dogs, he graduated with much the same class schedule that I had 30-something years ago. And that's not going to work in a system where kids need more real-world experience, more technology experience, more humanities. We're going to have to really rethink K through 12, I think, in the long term.
What were the bills that dealt with AI that you were looking at this session?
So I think there's a lot of concerns. We didn't have any specific bills. There are lots of bills that kind of floated out there on data privacy and artificial intelligence. And I think our concern has been, and it will continue to be, our companies online transcend states, they transcend countries. And if every state has its own artificial intelligence bill and its own data privacy bill, all of a sudden, your company, my company, and everyone else, we've got 50 different states that we've got to watch their laws for. And so we think that's a national solution that tells us what the parameters are for ethical AI and for ethical data privacy, and that we're punishing the bad actors and not the Main Street mom and pop companies that get hacked even though they did everything they were supposed to do. And so that's been a lot of our education at the Capitol this year, is helping legislators understand this is a very big issue, it's a national issue, and let's make sure that if we do pass bills, they look like a bill that North Carolina passed or Alabama passed, so that we're all on the same page.
We're almost at sine die. What are you looking for in the next few days?
So we still need to pass a couple of bills in tort reform, like the governor's Senate Bill 69 needs to move out of the Senate or out of the House. That deals with third-party and foreign litigation to make sure that people aren't abusing our legal system from Russia or from China or from London, for that matter. And then we've got a couple of more bills on tax that we want to get out, but I think those will all move easily. And quite frankly, at this part of the year, you play a little bit of defense to make sure that something that has unintended consequences doesn't undermine what you've been working on.
Okay. I've got to ask, some of the cutbacks at the federal level, especially grants,
yes,
are already hitting some of the business community in Georgia. So what are you hearing from your members, and what are you saying to them?
So a lot of our members are worried about what the impact of tariffs are going to be. They're worried about cuts, particularly in research and development. We have a lot of research universities in Georgia. We spin out a lot of companies from those. So we're now part of a national coalition that's looking at how you fund science, research, and development to make sure that we're telling the right story and we're getting those dollars that are available back into our universities and into our state. You know, I've heard from the president of Morehouse and Emory about the potential impacts there. So we're just trying to be a good advocate, make sure that our members of Congress understand where those dollars go, the impact that they have, and the fact that they're spinning off companies every single day in Georgia. And that's the great work of the Georgia Research Alliance. So we're trying to advocate and be a good partner there. And then obviously on tariffs, we're just trying to work with our partners all over the country, all over the world, and make sure that Georgia businesses know what they need to do in order to be compliant and to mitigate or to lessen the impact of any of those tariffs, and continue to talk to our friends in Washington every day about the potential impact.
I want to thank Chris Clark for that conversation. That interview took place before the final passage of SB 69, another of the tort reform bills. It is now also on the governor's desk. Well, coming up, as the session winds down, we take a look at what made this one stand out, the twists and turns, and what to expect on sine die. We'll get analysis from two people who have watched the legislative process unfold this year and have done so in the past. You're watching Lawmakers on GPB.
Georgia Farm Bureau, a grassroots organization dedicated to preserving Georgia agriculture. Farm Bureau advocates for all Georgia farmers at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
I'm a queen. I don't fear anyone.
This was a woman people wanted to follow.
You are an important part of our work.
You're stronger than you know.
Saddle my horse immediately.
She's a female trailblazer.
We did it by acknowledging our own worth. Please, do continue.
Understanding the past gives a sense of the future. This is the first time that anyone has seen this in 2,000 years.
This is amazing.
Oh, I'm excited now.
Pompeii is a battle against time.
You think I'm joking, but look at this. It did really happen.
Don't let anybody tell you who you are.
History teaches us to honor the past.
When you look back, you're like, wow, that was pretty special.
This is something that's actually altering the course of history.
You're charged with keeping these stories alive.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. You might say every Georgia legislative session has its own vibe. Tonight, we're going to discuss some of the bills that made this session unique and look at what's yet to come as things wrap up. Joining me is journalist Tagami. He's a reporter with Capitol Beat who is covering state government, and Capitol Beat is a partner with GPB, and you'll find the stories on gpb.org. Also here is political analyst, commentator Bill Crane, who is often on local and national media outlets. He is the owner of CSI Crane Communications. He also writes the column One Man's Opinion. And he'll give us his opinion tonight and more. Welcome to Lawmakers to both of you.
Always okay. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with this session and talk about each one having its own vibe. How would you describe it? I'll start with you, Bill.
I would say a national tilt and shift to the right in deference to the new president, return of Donald Trump, and some business-oriented bills like you just talked about with Chris at the Georgia Chamber to re-underscore Georgia's place as a top place to do business.
Yeah. How about you? How would you describe it?
It's always a frenetic pace, but this year it feels even faster than it has been in the past, and I think Bill's right. There's a lot of emphasis on national issues or things that people have been talking about. There have been a lot of bills about transgender issues, for instance, whether it's in the schools or the prisons. There have also been some bills that really affect people, birth to death, I like to think of it, with IVF guarantee in Georgia passing is a bipartisan bill, and that's important. A lot of people were concerned about that publicly. And then also on death, is this time to talk about one of my favorite bills of the
talk about that bill. This was a favorite of yours?
I think so, just because it came out of nowhere, and it I think surprised all the lawmakers involved with it. A funeral director brought a bill that has, I guess it was already legal, but put some rules around composting. It's something that composting people after we die. So that's something that all of us at some point will face, and there's a new way to
explain it.
Compost ash. I was taken aback by it because I was thinking increasingly people are cremated.
They are.
And if they're not, I'm on the board of the Monastery of the Holy Spirit, and we have a natural burial ground where you put people in hemp baskets and into the ground, and I'm thinking, surely they're not going to be farming there. I can't make the leap.
So talk about this a little bit. So you said it's actually a tub they put people in, and
yeah, I mean, they didn't go that far into the details, but yeah, that's some sort of, I don't know, I was imagining a rain barrel or something, looking like that. And there's a time frame. It's like 6 weeks to 2 months, and there's a certain temperature you have to maintain. And if you do it right, apparently there was testimony that it smells like a feed store in the facility where they do it. And what's, I guess, compelling is that the family can have the remains back in the form of soil and plant it in their, use it in their garden to grow things.
I will say, and I'm not trying to be too cynical, the funeral home industry has been very profitable for a number of years, but that industry is shrinking. Fewer and fewer people are going for traditional burial and cemetery, so a new revenue stream.
Yeah, that's it. That was interesting. Let's talk. You mentioned one bill that was partisan, and then we've had, the bipartisan bill was IVF. Let's talk about some more of the partisan bills. And
the
we were still
statewide
waiting.
Doge committee.
Talk about that.
Well, it's not something the state hasn't done before and couldn't do again. I mean, Sonny Perdue, for example, when he was governor, authorized a study. The state of Georgia did not have at that time a complete inventory of all the real estate that the state owned. And that resulted in a lot of surplus real estate being sold, put back into the marketplace, and also in downsizing that inventory, the utility expense, et cetera. So there's a place for this. But obviously that's probably not the reason that we got it this year.
So we'll see what happens with that as these agencies start cutting back. Let's talk about another partisan, taxes, of course, but it was reducing the tax rate, not the rebates that are coming back. The state continues to work on that.
Yeah, that's right. This year was a continuation. I don't remember last year's cut, but this year it's income tax, so it was a 0.2% rollback. That is
0.2 or 0.24 last year.
Yeah.
So
the eventual goal is to eliminate it. It's difficult to do because it's about a third of the state's revenue.
Yeah. And then the other thing, we're still waiting to see what's happening with the budget. And I want to talk about that. Right now, it's in conference committee because each side has their own idea what they want in that budget. And
the governor's is a little different, too.
Exactly.
And the only thing the Georgia General Assembly has to do is pass a budget. Now, they got the little budget passed. They got a little budget passed, which is truing up the old year's budget with realities and what came in very quickly. But, it'll be a long night for Ty.
Yeah. So it looks like it'll be a lot dealing with part of it is the Promise Scholarship or vouchers, where the House has reduced the amount of money and the Senate wants to have more.
Yeah, well, I think Governor Kemp had one number, which was kind of lower. And then the House, I'm sorry, I'm mixing that up with the other one, which was prisons. Those are the two contentious issues. There's a need for more correctional officers and improvements in facilities. And so I think Kemp had one number, the House had another, and the Senate's kind of come in between with a number in between. And they're still negotiating. And the vouchers, the House, it was, when the bill passed, there was an assumption that it would cost about $140 million a year. And the House set it at $40 million, I believe, and the Senate put it back at $141 million, actually. So we'll see where that goes.
Let's talk about what's going down the wire. The Religious Freedom Bill. Talk about that.
I do not believe it will be signed into law.
Really?
I do believe it'll pass.
It'll pass, but you don't see it doing something like with Governor Nathan Deal, who
I don't
vetoed
think it'll
it.
be as dramatic as Governor Deal's statement was, and I was talking before we started the show. The Georgia Chamber was very vocal that time about the potential concerns they had about the Religious Freedom Bill. They've been very quiet this time. So, but I also think Brian Kemp, the governor, is a very pragmatic man, and there's still some questions about some of the verbiage and whether it would be overturned. There is a federal law already that guarantees religious freedom, a superseding statute that passed during the Clinton administration. So the need is not great. It would be a pin to the conservative base of the Republican Party, and I think it will pass the General Assembly. I do not believe the governor will sign it.
Wow. What are your thoughts, even if on any other bills down to the wire?
There is a little bit of Republican resistance against RFRA.
Yes,
there was one Republican on the last committee that passed it who opposed it. There's some other partisan bills that actually do affect people, and one of them passed today. It was it has to go back, but it was an election bill. It would make some major 22-page bill, so there's a lot of changes in there. And I think one of the changes that people would notice right away is you can't drop off an absentee ballot at the weekend before an election. Well, you can now, but you wouldn't if this passes as is. There are a host of other changes in there, and that was a bitter vote between Republicans and Democrats. Yeah.
Okay, so we'd only have a little bit of time. Interesting session, and that what we saw today with the Democrats was a big move walking out, right?
I understand why the GOP has made such a series of issues around transgenderism, but the specific bill, the one to provide gender-affirming care in jails, mirrors the discussion again in the national campaign level. And if you didn't see it, there was an ad with Vice President Harris talking about not just providing gender-affirming care, but paying for transition surgery for state and federal inmates that was critical in that campaign.
We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you both for coming in. It always goes so fast, because that does it today for Lawmakers. There are more committee hearings tomorrow before signing day on Friday, so we will not have a show. We'll be back on Friday for 1 hour Lawmakers with live interviews, and we'll see you then.